Hey everybody, and welcome to another theory crafting video. Aren't you all so excited? I know I have been less than enthusiastic about the new expansion, Warlords of Draenor, but I figured by now I've gotten all my grapes out, and it's time to focus back on the story and the lore. The announcement and panels at BlizzCon provided us with a wealth of information to pull from, so I figured I'd make a sort of part 2 to my Warlords of Draenor theory crafting video. Mainly because 99% of what I brought up in the first video are not involved in the expansion whatsoever, so I figured, I should probably correct that. So let's get started, and remember to keep in mind, we still do not have most of the specifics yet, and a lot of the expansion retcons the novel Rise of the Horde. So let us first examine how the events of Warlords of Draenor actually begin, and what we know thus far. And what I'm not afraid to claim as a bit of a convoluted initial explanation, the basic rundown of how we get to a not yet exploded Draenor is thus. Following the events of the Siege of Orgrimmar, Garrosh is taken into the custody of Ner'zhul and the Shadowpan, and shipped off to await trial at the Temple of the White Tiger. At some point after that, and before the expansion begins, the trial commences, and regardless of what Vol'jin, Varian, and Ner'zhul's intentions are, the former war chief escapes with help from the bronze dragon Kairaz. You know, that dude from the Timeless Isle that we gave all those time magic influence stones to. Turns out, that wasn't exactly the best idea. Shocking, I know. Having enough of, in his mind, abomination of the lesser races in Thrall's horde, and his failure to stop the Alliance and the Rebellion, Garrosh decides to return to a point in time to change the events of the past. He returns to the most pivotal moment in the Orcs' history, when they succumb to the blood rage of the Legion by drinking Manaroth's blood, urged on by Gul'dan. Garrosh connects with his father Grom and reveals Gul'dan's plot. As a result, the only Orc clan to ingest the corruption is Gul'dan and his Stormreaver clan. So the Orcish Horde as we know it never is created, and this event causes the creation of a separate, alternate timeline, one where Gul'dan and Blackhand do not lead the Orcish Horde through the Dark Portal to attack Azeroth. However, Garrosh is not done yet. He convinces most of the Orc clans to unite under the banner of the Iron Horde. Armed with the technologies of our time, created by goblin engineers such as Siegecrafter Blackfuse, the Iron Horde, unified under Garrosh's father Grom Hellscream himself, prepares to return to our timeline to try and destroy the Alliance and Vol'jin's Horde once again. If you were like me, when you first heard about the time travel aspect of this expansion, you were a bit confused. So let me explain things in a bit of a simpler way. By the time Warlords of Draenor is released, the year will be 31 ADP, or after the Dark Portal opens in our timeline. It is before the year 31 that Garrosh time travels back a few years before the events of the Rise of the Horde novel, which has now been retconned to be about a year before the Dark Portal opens in our timeline, where they do drink the blood of Manaroth. Garrosh stops this and thus creates the alternate timeline universe. With some wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey magic, Kairaz connects our Dark Portal to the alternate Draenor timeline at about 4 years before the Dark Portal would have opened had history not been changed. This turns it red and allows the Iron Horde to attack Azeroth. This is how we learn of Garrosh's intentions, and the Horde and the Alliance launch suicide missions into the portal to try and destroy it from the other side. Backing the Horde players is none other than Thrall himself, who is out on a mission to bring Garrosh to justice for all he has done, as well as have the potential to see his parents alive. For the Alliance, Vindicator of the Draenei, Murad, seeks to somehow save this alternate timeline version of his people, the Draenei, from the genocide that the Orcs would commit on them. By doing so, we are taken to the alternate timeline for BDP, or before the Dark Portal opens in the alternate universe. Thus, the expansion begins. We arrive at the Tanaan jungle, which we would know better as Hellfire Peninsula in Outland. From the official website, the Tanaan jungle is described as, quote, "In primordial Tanaan, even the plants have teeth. Dark fronds stab out at unlucky wanderers or conceal canyons that plunge miles deep beneath the canopy, and these are far from the jungle's worst dangers. Each day, warlords fell even wider stretches of Tanaan's wilderness, striving to construct an apocalyptic device that will finally rend the gates of space and time for conquest unending. It is here we find the Bleeding Hollow clan, led by Chieftain Kilrog Deadeye. The Orc once saw his own death during a vision quest, and tore out his left eyeball free in a brutally symbolic gesture, embracing the finality of his fate. The Bleeding Hollow is famous for imbuing themselves with berserking fury and use weapons slathered in hallucinogenic venom. They stalk the prey from the treetops and brand their victims' final moments with visions of pure horror. The Horde and the Alliance managed to delay the Iron Horde by destroying the Dark Portal from Draenor's side, giving Azeroth time to prepare for a full-scale invasion. After temporarily delaying the Orcs, the Alliance and Horde meet up with old allies and go to their own separate zones. Following the assault on the Dark Portal, the Horde will travel to Frostfire Ridge. It is described as thus, quote, a harsh land of ceaseless winter and volcanic peaks, where travelers encounter molten lava as often as painfully cold snow. Rock-hewn Bladespire Fortress, built into the grandiose heights by the ogres to occupy its halls, is one of the few structures able to remain standing amidst this inhospitable wildness. It's the perfect target for the survivalist orcs of the Frostwolf clan. Unquote. And it is indeed here that Thrall and the Horde players reunite with Thrall's familiar clan. They are led by Thrall's father himself, Durotan. Loyal to his allies and terrifying to his enemies, Durotan leaves the Frostwolves in one of the most hostile lands imaginable. His people have rejected the Iron Horde's call for unity in order to focus more on their own survival. They've tamed the massive Frostwolves of the area and exist in the biting cold of Frostfire Ridge. Here, Thrall and the Horde player will help their new Frostwolf allies against the Thunderlord clan orcs and Ogre invaders who are capturing Frostwolf orcs and Draenei alike to take to their Blood Moss slag mines. Finally, the Horde will explore the question of, is Durotan an actual hero, or a villain who needed to act as a hero during our timeline out of necessity? Meanwhile, following the temporary victory at the Dark Portal on Draenor, the Alliance players travel to Shadowmoon Valley in search of Draenei allies. It is described as thus, quote, hidden under a shroud of perpetual night broken only by bright starlight, the lush, idyllic forests of Shadowmoon Valley are home to a majestic Draenei tomb and sanctuary, Karabor. While many of Shadowmoon's denizens study prophecy among Karabor's ancient stones, plotters with darker ambitions lurk in the valley's vast underground cave network, gazing greedily at the sacred temple. Unquote. For those of you who are unaware, the Temple of Karabor would be the place known in the future as Black Temple. Before falling to the Orcs and then later to Illidan's Stormrage, the Temple of Karabor was once a Draenei holy city where the Draenei prophet Velen himself occupied. And true, Velen will be a major character in the storyline of Shadowmoon Valley. The Alliance will work with familiar heroes including Velen, Vindicator Marad, and a not yet mutated Akama, who is now the leader of the Vindicators, to save Karabor from the Iron Horde. But while the Draenei and the Alliance deal with the Iron Horde, they also have to deal with the mysterious Shadowmoon clan and their chieftain, Ner'zhul. The Elder Shaman had a vision of a united Orcish culture and almost succeeded before being betrayed by his apprentice, Gul'dan. And while it is true that Garrosh stopped Gul'dan from persuading the Orcs from drinking Manaralt's blood, Ner'zhul's plan was dismantled when the Iron Horde was formed in the Orcish Horde's place. The Shadowmoon clan is renowned for being linked to the spiritual world and has many seers, astrologers, and speakers of the dead amongst their ranks. While the Draenei deal with the rest of the Iron Horde, Ner'zhul and his Death Sages use their mysticism to bring Draenor closer to total destruction. They are manipulating and experimenting with Draenei spirits at the Shadowmoon burial grounds for unknown reasons. But the Alliance's problems do not end there. Lurking in the midnight of Shadowmoon also remains the Stormreaver clan, led by the infamous chieftain Gul'dan. It is true that the majority of the orcs on Draenor refused Manaralth's blood, urged on them by Gul'dan himself, but that did not stop him and his clan from allying themselves with a demonic lord. Gul'dan is one of a handful of fellow orcs on this Draenor, his shamanistic power twisted by demonic corruption into the warlock we all love and hate from our timeline. Him and his Stormreavers now fight to wrest their rightful place in the Iron Horde from Ner'zhul and the Shadowmoon, all in a goal to tempt the Orcs' army into corrupting themselves as they have in our timeline to become slaves to the Burning Legion. Velen tries to lead the Draenei through all of this from Karabor, having spent millennia carefully weighing and recording the future as he foresees it so that creation itself does not fall. Velen's guidance preserved his people during an exodus from their homeworld of Argus. But now his wisdom is in question after the arrival of the Iron Horde. What value is there in a prophet whose visions cannot prevent a calamity like this? Vindicator Marad does not have the luxury to think on these questions, as he seeks to protect his people from literal genocide. Once a pillar of Draenei society, this wandering warrior of faith has experienced the horrors of the Alliance's campaign against the Lich King in Northrend, and it has left him prone to action above meditation. He will strike while others will tarry, but will his actions on Draenor cause him to become a warlord himself? Finally, a new champion arises from within the Draenei, the female paladin known as Yrel. Little is known for her other than her comparison between herself and the real figure of Joan of Arc, but she is expected to play a major role in the Alliance's actions on Draenor as one of their strongest champions. However, Draenei are not the only Alliance heroes besides the player to enter the portal to stop the Iron Horde. Khadgar, member of the Sons of Lothar, a group who sacrificed everything to destroy the Dark Portal from Outland in our timeline, steps up once again through this new Red Dark Portal against Garrosh's Iron Horde. Perhaps the most accomplished of all living wizards, Khadgar was an apprentice to the last guardian Medivh, until he helped defeat his master after realizing Medivh's own corruption. Though cursed by the same mentor with frailty and age, Khadgar remains an exemplar for the Alliance, up to and including volunteering for the suicide mission to Draenor alongside Maraud and the heroes. After the Horde and the Alliance save their allies from the Iron Horde and other evil shenanigans, they take the fight to the Orcish war machine itself. We first come to the desert canyons of Gorgrond. It is described as such. Quote, "The industrial development of the Blackrock clan has left the once glistening oasis of Gorgrond a desolate, rocky badland. Its only remaining natural product, the steam that boils up from massive vents beneath the earth. Gorgrond has become the source of the Iron Horde's arsenal. Its foundries churn out weapons, armor, and torrents of black smoke great enough to be seen from neighboring lands." Unquote. Gorgrond represents roughly where the Blade's Edge Mountains are in Outland. However, Gorgrond itself lacks any spiky mountains. It is said that when Draenor experienced its own cataclysm, Gorgrond and Frostfire Ridge smashed together, causing the mountain range we know on Outland as the Blade's Edge Mountains. Despite his loss at Orgrimmar, Garrosh has developed several exceptionally powerful war technologies and brought them with him to the past. This is what gives the Iron Horde its lethality, and it is in large thanks to the foundries of the Blackrock clan and their chieftain, Blackhand. A power-mad and tactically brilliant weaponsmith, Blackhand has both the ambition to rule and the cruelty to maintain his hold on the conquered. Because of his leadership, the Blackrocks have armed an entire world with Garrosh's technology. Slaves work on enormous siege engines, iron armor, and weapons that will inevitably be turned against their own families, neighbors, and homes. While in Gorgrond, the Horde and the Alliance will dismantle the Blackrock's operations at both the Blackrock Depot, where they store their vast arsenal, as well as the Blackrock Foundry, headed up by Blackhand himself. The Foundry itself is actually the second and final raid of the initial expansion launch, and consists of a heavier story about stopping the Blackrocks than most other raids to this date. It consists of 3 wings: the Slag Works, where minerals and ore are broken down into working materials; the Black Forge, where the weapons are molded for the Iron Horde's needs; and finally the Iron Assembly, where the Iron Horde itself gears up for their genocide across the planet. Once all 3 wings are dealt with, Blackhand can finally be taken down, and we can finally delay the Iron Horde to a significant margin. Next, we will head all the way south to the Spires of Arak. This harsh land is described as such. Quote, "For travelers limited to 2 legs, Arak is an autumnal swampy forest, framed in crooked trees that rest chin level with giants. High above the trees towers a landscape rarely seen by outsiders, impossibly tall rock spires too steep to scale. The Arakoa gaze out from these treacherous perches, watching their land like incarnate gods, and paying homage to the blessed sun by burning the, quote, lower races alive." Little is known about the Spires of Arak other than its inhabitants. The Arakoa here are not like those we met in Outland. They can fly, unlike their mutated versions in our timeline. These Arakoa are at the height of their power and sit atop the spires out of reach of the only other significant force in the area, the Shattered Hand Orcs. Funnily enough, winged Arakoa were foreshadowed during the Burning Crusade beta test during a quest that was removed before the game went live. The quest references several, quote, ill-advised choices and a failure of a, quote, sacred task that cost them their power, ability to fly, and very nearly their lives. It is very likely that our contest with these winged monsters comes to a head during the dungeon known only thus far by its name, the Arakoa Spires. Where the Arakoa rule the skies, the Shattered Hand orcs rule the land. They are known as the most sadistic and hate-filled orcs in all of existence, something their chieftain Kargath Bladefist has in spades. Once a slave to the ogres, Kargath cut his own hand off and attached the blade to the stump to slay his captors. This would form the basis for the Shattered Hand, a clan of outcasts and slaves. These orcs emulate their chieftain's body modification in homage to him, and has a nasty habit of sculpting their foes' flesh as if it were clay. Next, we come to the zone of Talador, and it is described as this. Quote, Talador is the heart of Draenor. It rests at the crossroads of the continent, divided by rivers that flow from the Sea of Zangar and enable marine travel through movement from east to west. At the center of Talador shrines the glorious cathedral city of Shattrath, a museum metropolis, an architectural marvel, a preserved recreation of Draenei culture, and one that is now entirely occupied by the Iron Horde. In the shadow of the besieged Shattrath city, the Auchenai soul priests seek to safeguard their countless Draenei souls in Auchendoun from a terrible demonic threat. It can be pretty safely assumed, then, that primarily the Horde and the Alliance will deal with trying to liberate the city, as well as preventing Auchendoun from falling as it has in our timeline. And as should be a surprise to nobody, Talador becomes Terakar Forest once the transformation into Outland and our timeline is complete. It should be noted that Auchendoun and Outland and the surrounding area only become such because of the summoning of Murmur by the Shadow Council on Outland. Thus, Talador shares its similarities to Terakar Forest, but without all the fell magic mutations and the large explosion around Auchendoun. True, the trees look nearly identical to how they do in Outland, a nice nostalgic touch. There will be a dungeon located in Auchendoun, but its story is still unknown to us at this point. And finally, but not least, we come to Nagrand. While relatively unchanged, it is described nonetheless as thus. Seafaring ogres claim the south of windswept Nagrand. They seek to dominate both the land and the orcs who dwell upon it. But more cryptic threats abound. A strange mist pours from the center of the plains. Embodiments of nature stir around the Throne of Elements, and the otherworldly crystals of Oshugan draw questers and fortune seekers from all over Draenor. Here, Draenei settlements find themselves under attack by the Warsong clan and their leader, none other than Garmash Hellscream. A passionate voice of pride and fury, Garmash acknowledges only pronouncements made in the language of swinging axes. His clan, the Warsong, is a nomadic group of dead-eye archers and bellowing wolf riders who gather at the vanguard of the Iron Horde, razing their enemies' land and homes to ember, and then stamping on those embers into ash. But while Thrall's forces fight against his once-upon-a-time friends' forces, the Alliance scramble to save the Draenei settlements from the Warsong as well. However, the Iron Horde are not the only enemies in the area. The ogres, having sailed north from their lands, are rampaging throughout Nagrand, forcing the Horde and the Alliance to eventually assault Highmaul, their seat of power. These are not the pathetically weak-muscled of the orcish hordes from our timeline ogres. These ogres are at the height of their civilization. Finally, as an afterthought, I should note two other smaller areas. The first is the island of Ashran. Little is known of the island other than its designation as a PvP zone, but it is the location of where Deathwing's lair used to reside in our original timeline. So I can at least say I got one thing semi-right from my other video. Secondly, we have the Fields of Farallon. I also brought this one up as well. This was a region of green, verdant fields and hills, home to the Laughing Skull clan on Draenor, as well as the location of the Kirin Va village, a group and a camp set up by a group of Kirin Tor wizards during the Second War in our original timeline. At BlizzCon, Farallon was announced as a zone, but not one that will be released at launch. Instead, it is planned to be used later as part of a major patch. So that essentially concludes all of the pieces of concrete lore information we have, so let us begin with a bit of theory crafting finally, shall we? So, a good place to start will be the ramifications of our own timeline on to Draenor. It has been stated repeatedly by Blizzard that this is not a time-traveling expansion, and that we are not going back into the past, but the past is coming back to us. And yet, nobody seems to be asking what that means for Draenor. That timeline does not exist in a bubble. It is part of a universe where an alternate timeline has progressed, past where Draenor's part in history is currently at. Things have happened in our timeline that cannot be ignored, even if we go back into the past of another dimension. Ner'zhul and Gul'dan cast the Orcish hordes into the hands of the Burning Legion. Grom Hellscream drank the blood of Manaroth and inspired countless other orcs to do the same, ultimately causing his death at the middle of the Third War. Blackhand existed as a mere puppet for Gul'dan in the Shadow Council. Kargath Bladefist becomes a Fel Orc in service to Illidan Stormrage. Kilrog Deadeye fell to Denath Trollbane, and Durotan escaped to Azeroth and was later assassinated, alongside his mate Draka, by Gul'dan's forces. Of course, we also know that Ner'zhul himself becomes the motherfucking Lich King after causing Draenor's destruction and transformation into Outland. I bring all of these events up because they will undoubtedly be reflected in Warlords of Draenor. Garrosh Hellscream is aware of the history of our timeline, regardless of if he travels to a past alternate dimension. How much does he exactly tell the Orcish clans to prevent them from drinking the blood? We know that Gul'dan is on the outs of the Iron Horde and is trying to usurp Ner'zhul's position in it. But is this Draenor Ner'zhul aware that he becomes the Lich King? Does this affect the Iron Horde's opinion of Ner'zhul? How does Blackhand react to knowing he was little more than a puppet to Gul'dan? It's intriguing and also a bit frustrating, because we are not giving any answers to this question during BlizzCon. How does Thrall react to his father being not as great as we all think he is? How does Thrall react to Grom being a figurehead in the enemy faction? And what about Orgrim Doomhammer in all of this? All we know of him in this timeline is that he and Durotan have had a falling out. Is it because the Frostwolves have refused to join the Iron Horde where the Blackrocks have? Doomhammer is a particularly interesting subject, especially when we consider what the second and final raid of the initial launch patch is. The Blackrock Foundry with Blackhand as the final boss himself. Does Doomhammer assume control of the Blackrock clan after his death? Does he continue to stay with the Iron Horde? Or does Thrall convince him with Durotan to betray Grom? Now we can't just think about the Horde in this regard. What about the Alliance? Does Velen have any or all of the Atamal crystals, which were shards of a Naru artifact that granted its wielder great power? Will we be bringing back the alternate Velen or an uncorrupted Akama? Blizzard said we wouldn't be dealing with duplicates on Draenor, but they never said anything about duplicates on our Azeroth. I could go on and on, but I'm sure by now you understand where I'm going with this. Blizzard has told us that Draenor's past will not affect our past, but what happens in Warlords of Draenor will affect our future. Could we see a living Durotan, Orgrim Doomhammer, or even Ner'zhul or Grom Hellscream return through the Dark Portal to our timeline? Mists of Pandaria and Garrosh's War cost the orcs greatly. Many notable orcs were lost because of it, such as General Nazgrim, and this could be the perfect opportunity for Blizzard to reinforce the Horde, as well as the Alliance, with the Draenei that they saved during the expansion. Next, let's talk a little bit about who could be behind the scenes manipulating all of the Iron Horde's actions in Warlords of Draenor. For those of you who are unaware, Blizzard let slip that despite Garrosh preventing the orcs from drinking the blood of Manaroth and becoming subservient to the Burning Legion, somebody is behind the scenes manipulating things. This has led to the lore community to wildly speculate about the identity of such a person. I'm going to cover a few people that I believe are the most likely. First, let's start with Kairos himself. This is the bronze dragon who helped Garrosh escape to the past, and essentially put everything of this expansion into motion. It could also be entirely possible that Kairos himself put the thought into Garrosh's head to return to the moment of the orcs' greatest tragedy and stop it. But why would Kairos do this? What would he stand to gain? Let's go on a little theory crafting journey together now, shall we? There have been various beliefs at the Timeless Isle quest chain, resulting in the revelation that Kairos himself was the traitor to the Bronze Dragonflight, was the beginning of the Infinite Dragonflight's creation. Why else would Sori Dormi, Nozdormu's prime consort, be killed? What purpose would that serve? So assuming Kairos is on the path to becoming an Infinite Dragon, let us then ask, why would the Infinites be meddling with Azeroth in this way? And to answer that, we have to examine the purpose of the Infinite Dragonflight. Essentially, they exist to royally fuck up the timelines. We've never really learned more about their reasons for doing so beyond this. And if the timelines are screwed up, it pretty much is agreed upon that things will generally just be bad news bears for everyone involved. Chaos would spread. Chaos. Pure chaos. And which other malignant entity exists to cause pure chaos, ladies and gentlemen? The Old Gods! I've never put much stock into the theory that the Infinite Dragonflight were connected to the Old Gods, but that was until I saw this Shah. Creatures born of the Old God Y'Shaarj's dying breath, and they look strikingly similar to the Infinite Dragonflight. It could simply be that both are malevolent looking for the sake of being malevolent looking, but that's far too easy for a theory crafting video. What if Kairos and the Infinite Dragonflight are simply doing the bidding of the Old Gods? The Old Gods, as I've already said, exist only to spread chaos. They want to undo the Titans' work of creating an ordered universe. They are a literal infection of Azeroth, and infections just love to spread. What could be more tantalizing than traveling not only to another timeline, but another planet in that timeline? It has been now confirmed that the Titans visited Draenor during the 2013 BlizzCon panels, and the Old Gods just love to screw up the Titans' work. There's one final piece to this puzzle that I think might actually make this theory true. Those of you who played during BC will remember a certain scene in Shadowmoon Valley, where a group of Arakoa spirits are summoning none other than an Old God. Sure, it was the same model of Cthulhu, but that doesn't change the fact that these Arakoa were clearly in league with the Old Gods. What if, now follow me here folks, what if the Old God sent Kairos, whether he was aware of it or not at the time, to send Garrosh back in time to connect our reality to Draenor's alternate reality? It wouldn't exactly be out of the Lovecraftian trope that the Old Gods take after to say they exist out of both time and space. What if they can see all dimensions and times? What if they are working both through the Garrosh angle to form the Iron Horde and sow chaos by throwing them against the Alliance and Horde, as well as through the Arakoa? What if these, quote, ill-advised choices that the Arakoa made reference to during the BC beta quest were working with the Old Gods? That might all have sounded like a little bit of a stretch, but I believe I've just made the sufficient connections to make this theory make sense. So in the end, this first person could not be actually Kairos himself, even though I said that. It would be actually the Old Gods working through Kairos. The typical and stock answer of, the Old Gods did it. Now let's move on to my own personal favorite theory, even if admittedly it isn't the most likely one. In as simplistic terms as possible, the Burning Legion did it. This theory doesn't assume that the Legion was behind Garrosh going back into the past. Perhaps Kairos just felt some kind of sympathy towards Garrosh and truly did not know what would happen. After all, the Bronze Dragonflight can only catch glimpses in time now. Perhaps he just didn't know. And perhaps the Legion saw this connection and managed to contact their own force in the alternate dimension and is planning a joint attack to conquer Draenor and then finally destroy Azeroth once and for all. We know there are demons in Warlords of Draenor. They are involved with Auchindoun and their manipulation of the Draenei spirits. And who do we have, ladies and gentlemen, on Draenor that we already know is connected to the Burning Legion? Our good friend and my personal favorite orc, the illustrious, self-styled darkness incarnate, Gul'dan himself. We already know, per Dave Kosak at BlizzCon, that Gul'dan in this version of Draenor is, quote, on the phone with Kil'jaeden. And from what we've been told of Gul'dan and the Stormreaver clan's mission in Warlords of Draenor, it is to first supplant Ner'zhul in the Iron Horde, and then convince the orcs to drink Manaroth's blood and give themselves over to the Legion. And it honestly isn't difficult to see how Gul'dan could accomplish this. Imagine, if you would, that Warlords of Draenor comes out. We progress through the 6.0 storyline. Blackhand is defeated, and we deal with most of the Iron Horde's threats. In their desperation, Gul'dan suggests the power of the Legion to help the Iron Horde defeat the Horde and the Alliance. And there we go, bada bing bada boom, the corrupted orcs are back once more. Gul'dan helps the Legion get to Draenor from the alternate timeline, and they wash over the planet, having been sufficiently weakened by both the Iron Horde as well as the Horde and the Alliance, all fighting amongst themselves. Once on Azeroth, they help bring our timeline's Legion back to our planet, and together they have the necessary force to destroy the entire planet. In a lot of ways, what happens to Draenor will mimic what happens in our own timeline. It's a theory I've been both reading about and thinking about myself, and I find intriguing. What if, at the end of Warlords of Draenor, we inadvertently cause the same conclusion as happened at the end of Beyond the Dark Portal, the Warcraft 2 expansion? Gul'dan and Ner'zhul will be gone. Blackhand will be dead. Durotan, at some point during this quest chain and storyline of an expansion, will be killed by Gul'dan's forces on Draenor because the Frostwolves inevitably side with us against the Iron Horde. It is true, we are in a different universe, but characters at their core remain the same. Ner'zhul may have not followed the same path as he does in our universe, but ultimately his lust for power will cause his own downfall, in whatever way that will be. However, truth be told, I actually have not had enough time to fully develop this theory, but I find it particularly interesting, and I think it would be cool if they ultimately decided to do it at the end of this expansion. Finally, let's talk about the most likely culprit behind everything, the one that Metz hinted at us being able to figure it out if we paid attention to the story already when he said this at BlizzCon. This is none other than the Black Prince himself, Wrathion. This one shouldn't be too hard to figure out, folks. To begin, Wrathion has shown to be blatantly allied with Kairos on the Timeless Isle. Secondly, Wrathion also blatantly states at the end of the legendary quest chain that next time he's going to take control of things himself, like Onyxia did in Stormwind, to stop the Legion from destroying Azeroth. For those of you who haven't done the quest chain, and if you haven't, you can see it on my channel and my other videos, Wrathion admits in the finale that he initially was banking on Garrosh to conquer all of Azeroth and fight against the Legion when it returns. However, in his foolishness, Garrosh caused a civil war within his own faction, so Wrathion switched his bets to the Alliance. He powered up the player to set everything up for Varian to destroy the Horde at the end of the Siege of Orgrimmar. Wrathion believed that despite a year or two of fighting, the remnants of the Horde would give up and be absorbed, and a unified alliance would stand against the Burning Legion. But I don't have to tell you folks, that's not what happens at the end of that raid. After Varian's refusal to destroy and dismantle the Horde, Wrathion needed to get a bit more hands-on. And he still remembers the strength and tenacity to which Garrosh ruled the Horde, so he sends him back in time when the orcs were at their absolute strongest, with the technology that nearly won Garrosh the war against the Alliance in our time. This was a no-brainer for the Black Prince. What better force to stand against the Legion than the Iron Horde, with the technologies of our time and the knowledge of how the Legion has manipulated them in the past in our timeline? Garrosh is more than aware of what the Burning Legion through Gul'dan has accomplished in terms of hurting the Orcish race. What if Wrathion's plan was to form the Iron Horde and have it attack and conquer our Azeroth in preparation for the Legion's return? And in the end, as typical of a manipulative black dragon as he is, all he had to do was tell Kairos to send Garrosh back into the past, and the former war chief did all of the work for him. The orcs never drank the blood of Manaroth. The Iron Horde was formed with Garrosh's technologies from our present, and they began attacking Azeroth. Now, let's begin by wrapping this bad boy up, shall we? We all know, assuming if we're following my theory, that Wrathion is the most likely one who caused everything from behind the scenes, but how do we actually get to that part in the storyline per the patches? This answer is actually quite simple. Blizzard let on a bit more than I think they knew with one of their panels at BlizzCon, particularly the art panel. Not exactly their most popular one, but they did release a picture that was quite interesting. As they began in the art panel, they took a look at certain maps of certain areas. One of their prototypical maps of the entire continent of Draenor was shown, as they tend to do with most expansion zones and overall maps when they release or announce an expansion. This map will show each zone, important cities, important landmarks, and dungeons and raids in each part of the continent. And they showed off Talador, and as they did, we saw a nifty little raid marker smack dab on Shattrath City. Coupled with that, with the fact that we know Shattrath serves as the Iron Horde's main base of operation, as well as we know the only two raids at the launch tier of Warlords of Draenor are High Mall and Blackrock Foundry, it can be reasonably assumed that patch 6.2, the first raid patch after the expansion comes out, will be Shattrath. And I'd give anything to guess that the final boss will be leader of the Iron Horde himself, Grom Hellscream. So, without a unified Iron Horde after patch 6.2, Wrathion has no choice but to face us directly now. His plans have been ruined once again, and I would hazard a guess that a 3-year-old who has not gotten his way twice now will be pretty upset. I could go on about how the Wrathion raid could work, but at this point we simply do not have enough information. You'd have Wrathion and Kairos, I think, as bosses, but that's about it at this point in time. But we also could guess where Wrathion would have set up shop during this expansion. And wouldn't you know it, it's a place that they said would show up later on in the expansion. A little place known as the Fields of Farallon. If we are to believe Blizzard, it has become an island now. and that would be perfect place for the Black Prince to observe the happenings of Draenor while we deal with the Iron Horde's threat. It also sets up quite the interesting dynamic between Wrathion forming an island base and Deathwing having done the exact same thing during the Second War on Draenor. On a personal level, I like that father-son connection. It ties into one of the few things I think that I got right during my theory crafting video, the idea of a father and son expansion. You'd have Wrathion acting like Deathwing, Thrall meeting his father, and Garrosh and Grom Hellscream meeting each other. So, let's finish up this video by exploring the options for the next expansion after Warlords of Draenor. I know you might be thinking it's a bit early for that, but it is never too early for theory crafting. That probably won't be anywhere close to true when we actually find out about it. But whatever, this is my video, so I'm going to do what I want. Now, assuming the patch's story play out as I have said here, I think there are probably two next expansion options that can happen. The first is my stock answer of Azshara. With the Horde and the Alliance forces occupied on Draenor, that leaves Azeroth ripe for the picking. And none other than Azshara has the forces, through her Naga, and the power, through both her control of Neptulon and the Old God connection, to accomplish this. Perhaps she truly is with the Old Gods, but what if she isn't? What if in the end of the Azshara expansion, that leads into the final Burning Legion one? What if, in the final raid, where we're killing Azshara, she summons all of these powers from the remnants of the Well of Eternity, and we attract the Burning Legion, and thus, Wrathion's prophecy is fulfilled. Secondly, of course, the second option is just that the Legion attacks us anyway, because why not? They're the Legion, they can do whatever they want. There's not much to theorycraft here, as I don't think I really need to explain, or I don't really find it necessary to explain again why and what the Legion would do to get to the planet. And with that, we've come to the end of this theory crafting video. Holy crap, another almost 40-minute video. Sheesh, I really gotta get a hobby, guys. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you disagree or have any questions about any argument or theory I presented here, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I love answering people's questions and having a dialogue in the comments, even though if I don't like the comment system, but I've gotten over it at this point. So yeah, leave those in the comments below if you have any questions or disagreements. If you like this video, you could help me out tremendously by liking, favoriting, commenting, and especially subscribing. However, you know the drill now, folks. The best way you could assist me would be to share my videos with people you think would find them interesting. As I always say, I'm always looking to introduce more people to the lore, and if you do, I will be forever grateful. Thank you once again for watching this super long video, everybody. My name is Necroxis, and I'll be sure to catch you next time for whatever lore we choose to look at next. Because in Warcraft, with a new expansion coming out nonetheless, there is always more lore to explore, people. And I hope you do that with me. Farewell, everybody.